All right, welcome everyone. I am so excited to introduce Chief Hefel from City of Galena PD. He has 27 years experience in law enforcement. Welcome to Words of the Wise, Chief Hefel. Thank you so much
Well,
for
thank
being
you.
here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I
Of
appreciate it.
course. Of course. So 27 years.
Hmm.
That's a long time.
It is a long time.
How did you get started in law enforcement? What did those 27 years look like for you?
I got started. My father was an Illinois State Trooper. My grandfather, he was a sheriff, correction, he was a sergeant with the Davis County Sheriff's Department, which is the county that Galena is located in. So I kind of grew up in that, as a child, and I saw it. Ever since high school, that's probably what I wanted to be. It's what I was striving to be. And it took a little while because when I was applying to be a police officer at that time, it was busy. I was living in by Chicago in the suburbs, and there would be I would have they would have two positions, and there'd be 200 people there applying. So it took a while, but I finally got onto a police force near my hometown in East Dubuque, Illinois, and that's where my career started. I did 14 years in East Dubuque, and then I came to Galena, which is my hometown.
What made you always want to be in this career? Was there something about it that you just knew was for you and that was enticing?
Yeah, there has been. I know, like I stated, growing up watching my father, my grandfather do the job. Um, a lot of people say they want to get into help people, and that's the main thing. I still think that's probably the reason 90 some percent of people get into it, as well as myself. But I saw, some of the and heard the stories of if they had a car chase, if they had a major incident. I mean, my father one time he was shot at, it went through his pant leg, and I mean it's kind of an adrenaline thing, but I think the main reason is I saw them help people. I heard their stories. There was also bad stories too as well, but I think the good outweighed the bad by far, and that I think that led me in this direction.
Yeah, and I think we hear that a lot. It's like you never know what's going to happen. It seems like really exciting, like you said, that adrenaline rush of like
Hmm.
chasing bad guys. But I do think you're right that, I think at the heart of it, it's, everyone, and I think you have to have that why. Like, I think you have to have that deeper reason why you do the things that you do. And I do think that probably at the core of everyone in law enforcement, there's that piece of helping people. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I know that, 27 years ago, wellness wasn't really a concern of law enforcement. How have you seen wellness evolve over time?
I think it's kind of drastically changed within the last 5 years, probably, for
Mhm.
me anyway. I know when I started in 97, if you had an incident where, there was deaths, there was shootings, whatever you were called upon, you didn't really do a lot of debriefing afterwards, every once in a while maybe, but there was just kind of the mentality that suck it up. Let's,
Yeah.
go on to the next call or you'll be fine, whatever. And I think that weighed on a lot of people. Um, and fortunately now for myself and a lot of other officers and my officers, if we have a major incident, there is a mandatory debrief where they will go talk to people. They don't have to say anything if they don't want to, but they're going to go and at least listen to other people's thoughts and how to deal with such incidents. And I was just at an Illinois Police Chiefs conference, and I learned some other wellness places or organizations you can join. There's ValorNet, which does police officers, military, teachers. It's all confidential, which is a big thing, I think. And a lot of it is run by peers, like Concerns of Police Survivors. That's another organization that you can call in, and it's confidential. And sometimes people, I think, are more apt to speak to these people rather than maybe somebody from your own organization, just because they don't want to be stigmatized as that person from the past that you know he can't take it. So I think it's come a long way, and I think it shows in my officers and other departments around. I've seen a great change, and I think for mental wellness, it's a very good change.
Yeah, and I want to ask you, you said that you come from this mentality or this back, not you, but come from an era where the mentality was, suck it up and you'll be
Yeah,
fine, kid. Do you think that people were fine? Or do you think that there was just so much stigma around needing help that everyone just did a really good job of kind of shoving it down and surviving?
I think probably more of the latter, just shoving it down and surviving. uh, you're supposed to be some type of almost like a superhero. You don't have feelings, but a lot of people don't realize, a lot of people do now, that we're just normal human beings. Everybody has feelings. Things are going to get to you. Um, and eventually, the people I think that back in the day that didn't get help, a lot of people resorted in drinking a lot or other things. And that's, I think, probably a lot why divorce rate, suicide rate is so high among cops as it is, because they're in some places and some of the old timers like myself, not me, but other people, there's still that stigma. They don't want to get help. And I think that leads them down a path that they probably don't want to go down, but it's just something that happens because they don't want to, talk to somebody and work through things.
Yeah, and I agree with you that, I've been in this wellness space for the last 8 years, and I do agree with you that there have been great strides to breaking that stigma and offering support. What are some of the things that you have done throughout your career that have helped you personally, for your physical and mental wellness on the job?
Yeah, that's a good question. Back in my early days, there wasn't a lot of mental talk or anything of mental wellness. I relied a lot on my family. I'm lucky. I have a wonderful wife and two grown daughters now. And I was able to lean on my wife, for the majority of the time. And she understood going in about a police officer's, you know, their job. And there's going to be some stuff that comes home with it. And I would talk a lot with her. And I think having the family connection, and we would do things, we would camp, we would do other things. And I think that helped me through a lot of that when there wasn't the people that you could reach out to like there is now.
Yeah. There's a question I always ask people, and usually it's, during a briefing or a roll call session or at an academy level. But I do think that, we talk a lot, and in the beginning of this conversation, I asked, kind of what was your why for getting into law enforcement? But the question I ask a lot is, what is your why when it comes to wellness? And that looks different from your why you got into law
Yeah.
enforcement. And everyone has a different why. And it can't, I always tell people, I'm like, it can't come from me. I have no weight on your life. I'm an outsider coming in. And, as of 5 minutes ago, for most people that I, walk into a briefing room, I'm like, I'm a stranger. So if I
Sure.
stand up in front of you and say, this is what you should think is important and this is what you should, prioritize, people are gonna be like, who are you? But
Right.
I do think that it's a very important question to ask, what is your why? Why is it important for you to stay mentally and physically fit? Has that why for you been your family, or what has been your why for your own personal wellness?
That's a great question because I would say it's maybe a couple of different things. The majority of it would be my family. I've seen a lot of my colleagues and officers that they go through divorces and they have rough times. And I've seen them, like I said earlier, go down the path where their outlet is going to the bar or doing whatever. I've seen officers get fired over these type of issues. And that motivates me, not to go down those paths. But I think having a good core relationship with your family and maybe some good friends that I find sometimes that are outside of the job I can rely on. And I think that is kind of like my why I've decided to work on both my mental and my physical wellness.
And I think it's really important to understand that like people can teach you what to do and what not to do. And that's what that sounds like to me. You're like, my whole life, and I think we talked a little offline about this, but like my parents were drug addicts. Like my dad was in and out of prison, and I learned a lot about what not to do. As a parent, as a citizen of the community. Like there are a lot of things that I learned not to do. And I think that is a powerful message of like, hey, like there's a lot of things that you can learn to do, but you can also learn from other people who are maybe making mistakes and decide how you want to live your life. And having a deeper reason why, I think kind of keeps that motivation and that self-assessment.
Yeah, I agree 100%. My mom and dad were divorced, as a lot of police officers were when I was younger too, as well. And I've seen it all. And I think you said it great. I've learned a lot from not just my family, but other officers and friends throughout my life, what to do and what not to do. And it's examples of both. And I think you need to look at both sides of it to learn from it.
Yeah, and I love that you said learn from it because then it's like, how can you now as a leader help other people through those things that you learned? Because you did learn on both sides of it, and now you have more tools in your tool belt that you can help others so that they don't make those same mistakes too. And they have those, positive outlets that they can run towards, and they're not going down the path of drinking and escaping and numbing, and they're going down a more positive, path of leaning on their family, having a stronger family connection, doing things outside of the job that are healthy, like camping and, healthy outlets, so all the
Right.
things that you've learned have given you the tools to be able to teach other people.
Yeah, I agree with that. Actually, I haven't thought about it that way as far as me being an example for that type of thing. But when you state it that way, I tend to agree. And it's not just me. I have other people that work here that are the same mindset. And I think some of the newer people that start here, and I tell them all the time, we're the example. They're going to look to us for what to do. So I, I believe that 100%. I think that that motivates the people to probably go down the right path.
Yeah, and I think it's too, I mean, just to go back to like kind of the two sides of the coin, I think, I try to remember this in my life. It's like you can be a good example for people or you can be a bad example for people. And like, how can you choose to go
Right.
and be a good example? And I think sometimes you don't realize how you can impact someone's life. I think that so often, like, we have kind of tunnel vision into what we're doing that we don't realize that like people are looking to you for, ways to be, whether that's your family or
Yeah.
people within your organization. And I don't think that this has to come from an executive level. I think that this could be anyone within the organization. People are looking at how you act, even from a peer-to-peer perspective. And, you have the opportunity to either be a good example or a bad example.
Yeah. I agree 100% with that. I really do.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, I think in or my earlier life, I was not a good example. And I learned over time, like, how can I be the best version of myself? And I think that that starts with you having to, take a look at your own wellness and figure out what resources work for you so that you can be physically and mentally fit. So like you have to kind of take care of yourself first, and then
Mhm.
you can be that example. I know that when we talked offline, you said that, maybe you had had a few injuries throughout your career. And so now that's something that you really prioritize is making sure that you're preventing any future injuries from happening and that you can be active with your family and have that longevity. Can you give a little bit of background on that and maybe some things that you do for your physical wellness that's helped you to reduce that risk of injury?
Yeah, I sure can. And it kind of goes back to you saying you learn from some of your own mistakes and things. When I first started, obviously, I didn't prioritize physical or mental wellness enough. Um, and I was in a situation where I was in a foot chase with a guy in the street, and we cut out behind a large SUV in front of this concert hall. And my sergeant was in the vehicle I jumped out of because I saw the guy he had some drugs on him. And as I was grabbing a hold of him, I got hit by the car, my own Sarge squad car, which is kind of funny in a way. But I broke my left leg, and it wasn't horrible. That injury wasn't bad, but it was a broken leg. I was off for a while, and I had a lot of time to reflect on different things because I was off for a while. Then I was on light duty, and I had time just to kind of observe and reflect on. At this point, I think I was 28, 29 years old, so I was fairly young but old enough to know that it was time that I had to change and work on some of my physical wellness. I think that came first for me, to be honest with you, before my mental wellness. I began to work on that. And that broken leg injury kind of led me down that path of working out, lifting weights, and doing cardio after I got out of my cast. That was kind of what started it. But that led me down the path for that. And I've kind of continued that since that time, that first injury.
I think that, and this is a really good reminder because sometimes starting with the physical is a segue to the mental and emotional wellness of somebody. And I think that a lot of times, like in, and I do like to think that stigma is breaking and that people are more receptive to mental wellness. But if someone's not, or someone is maybe younger in their career, or maybe someone's totally against some of the stuff, I think if you walked into a room full of cops and you said, who wants to be injured? No one's going to raise their hand. Like, no one wants to be injured. And
No.
and I make this joke all the time, but I'm like, you might want a vacation. You might want some time off, but like,
Yeah.
no one wants to actually have an injury. And when it comes to injury prevention, it's never ever going to be injury elimination, right?
No.
There's always going to be injuries that are unavoidable. Like, if I go into a class, I'm like, I can't control if someone goes and punches you in the face or, but we can try to reduce the risk through mobility and stability training, things of that nature. And I think that the physical is a really, really good segue into mental wellness because if you feel better physically, you're going to feel better mentally, and
Right.
then you're going to have that snowball effect. Receptiveness will open. So I love that you mentioned that. You're like, actually, my physical fitness and wellness was maybe more of a priority first. And then I was able to, kind of segue into
Yeah.
that mental wellness piece because I think that it's a really, really good start. Start with the physical always. Like if you
Right.
feel better physically, you're going to feel better mentally. It's a really good way, like jumping off point.
Yeah, and I agree. And just to touch on my second injury, it was New Year's Day about 12 years ago. We were wrestling with a subject at a house, and then at one point I had to grab him and take him down. And when I did, it was muddy. It was New Year's Day, but it was still muddy. My boot got stuck, and then he went on top of my leg, and two other officers went on top of my leg. And I don't know if you know what Joe Theismann injury is, but my ankle snapped and kind of went the wrong way. That was a bad one because that one I had surgery on, I was off for over 6 months. And I was told in the middle of the process that I may have to go out with disability because I might not be able to run again. I might walk with a limp again. And I think that one really had my mental wellness. I think it really activated it then because I knew I wasn't going to retire and I knew I was going to be able to run and I knew I wasn't going to walk with a limp. I did have like 4 screws that are still in my ankle put in, but I don't have the mobility that I had before, but I'm still able to do things. I'm still able to run. I'm still able to walk normal. I can't run as fast probably, but I'm older anyway. So, but that was something that I had a lot of time again to sit and think about. And that's, I think, a lot when the mental stuff for me came in because I had doctors and nurses telling me that I might be done with my career, and that was 12 years ago. And at that point, still, as today, I'm not quite ready to retire yet. So it took some mental fortitude, I think, to get through it. But I think having, like I said before, I started my physical fitness and stuff before that. I think that helped because of mobility and everything going through physical therapy. It was a lot, but it worked out and I'm back. And I think both physical and mental had something to do with that injury coming back from it.
Yeah, 100%. It sounds like you had that kind of like mental resiliency and maybe a little like stubbornness to be like, nope,
Yeah.
like you're wrong. Like
No.
I'm gonna do these things again and I'm gonna show you and I'm gonna work hard to get there. So no, I love that. And I do think that um you do, I mean, here's the thing, like when you're injured and you're in that position, I could only imagine like if you didn't have that mindset of where your mind could go. And I think a
Hmm.
lot of people struggle with that, like you're out for however long. You feel like you don't have the purpose anymore. A lot of agencies, from what I hear, don't reach out to you and ask if you're okay. So you feel alone, like you don't
Right.
know what's going on. And so I could see how the opposite of that could be really detrimental if you start getting in a bad mental headspace. And so when we talk about mental resiliency and proactive wellness, it's training the mind to be prepared for worst case scenarios, to be
Yep.
prepared for the hard times. And if you're not in a good mental state and you get injured and you're out, it's just going to compound. So trying to get in front of it, trying to be proactive as much as you can to make sure that, you're in a good mental state, so
Right.
that, if and when something happens, that you're ready for it mentally.
Exactly. Yep.
So I wanted to, and I don't know if anyone who's listening to this who isn't familiar with your state and maybe some of the policies in place, there's a particular policy in place that has kind of changed the way that you guys police. And I was hoping that maybe you could give some insights into maybe some of the changes that you've seen and what that has done to, um, the mental wellness of your guys and girls within your organization.
Sure. Over the past few years since the George Floyd incident in Minneapolis, things have changed here in Illinois. It's commonly referred to as the Safety Act, which has, in my opinion, put a lot of restrictions on how we can police. Some of them, I believe, some of the stuff is good, but we have adapted where everybody has body cameras by 2025, which is in effect now. We were ahead of the game. We had body cameras before then. A lot of departments didn't. Um, a lot of officers weren't sure how the body cameras are going to work, but everybody loves them now because it 99% of the time we have complaints that the officer said or did this to someone, and we all we have to do is review the body camera footage and get the real story. Um, there's other changes where there's the new Bail Bond Act. How somebody has to meet a criteria. We have to fill out forms, and it's major crimes, just such arson, sex assault stuff, basically for somebody to get held in the jail. Otherwise, we will still arrest them. We will take them to jail to get booked in. But by the time a lot of times we're doing our report, they're out the door before we're even done doing the report. So that in itself is hard to keep a lot of officers motivated. I think they feel a little bit slighted by our government here. Um, but it's just a matter of working with them and explaining to them this is the world that we live in now. This is for a while at least. This is how it's going to be. You have to adapt. You have to overcome. And we work with our officers here to try to keep them again with the mental health, so they're not disgruntled because these people are out. You just have to accept that this is kind of the way it's going to be now, and we try to work through that.
And what are some of those things that you've been doing to prioritize their wellness and keep morale high? Like some of the programs and trainings that you have in place within your organization to help with that.
Sure, we do meetings here at the police department. We'll have try to have as many officers as we can come in. And we'll talk with them. A lot of people aren't comfortable in a group situation. So between myself and some of the command staff, we try to reach out to our officers and see how they're doing. We offer, like I talked earlier about ValorNet or concerns of police survivors, or there's local mental health places that there are people that we can refer them to or they can talk to. Um, and as far as the other stuff, when the people are released and they're upset at work, it's tough. It's hard to keep them motivated, but I think through communication with us and explaining to them, we're still doing our job. We still have a job to do. We still have to protect the people, which is what we want to do, and keep people safe. And in our community, we're lucky because 99% of the people here, support us. And just quick, a little background of Galena. It's a small town around 5,000 people, but we have 1.5 million tourists come through here a year,
Mm.
and we're a small department. So with that volume of people, over 1 million people, we're busy. So we don't have a lot of time. Even there's a ski resort, or even in the winter you know, to have a lot of off time. We're busy, which is good. I think being busy helps, but I just think the communication between command and offering people different outlets, and offering them different people they can talk to about their concerns has helped our department a lot.
Yeah, and I know like when we talked offline that you guys are really trying to prioritize mental health and have open lines of communication and make sure that leadership is supportive of these things. There's a few other things that you guys are doing. I know that you have maybe some workout
Yeah.
facilities on site. Are you able to maybe mention some of those other things that you have as well?
Yeah, we relocated in our police department, which is a larger two-story building, and there was a lot of open space down in our lower level where we used to be. So we turned that into a workout room with weights and some power racks and some treadmills, ellipticals and stuff. So that's nice. Um, we have a couple other gyms around here that we offer. We try to work with those gyms and see if certain people. We just had one approach if they wanted to do some physical wellness stuff with us as far as meal plans and workout routines and things like that. So we're trying to push that. I'm trying to get some type of incentives where in Illinois you have to take a power test, which is a bare minimum to be able to be eligible to be a police officer. And it's scaled as you get older. It gets a little bit easier. So if everybody we haven't affected this yet, but I would like to see it where if you can pass for your age level, the power test, either you get like a comp day or some type of bonus or something small, but just something to keep people motivated to keep working towards their physical wellness as well.
Yeah, I had another chief recently say like because they were talking about the same thing about like how can we incentivize and like keep people motivated and engaged, and they were like the two things that cops love the most is money or time off.
Yeah,
So
I
how can
agree.
we have incentives to get people motivated to do things? And I think really honestly that I don't think it's just in policing. I think it's just human nature. It's hard to start new habits, and that first
Yeah,
step is the hardest step. And I always relate it to this, like if someone doesn't like floss and you're like, "Hey, you should really floss." The the amount of effort it takes to get someone to like start a new habit, is
yeah,
hard. And so like when you say like, "Hey, like here's an incentive or here's something to kind of keep you motivated," I think it just serves as that initial first step. And hopefully the goal is that once they do it, then they like it, they see benefit, and then it becomes a part of that long-term routine,
yeah.
something that you incorporate into your, daily or weekly life. But I think it's that first step. It's like, how do we get that first initial step so that you can build that habit?
No, yeah, I agree. It seems to be easier with our newer people than some of the older guys that are closer to my age, but I think that's just a generational thing. But we're slowly working it into everybody, and it's starting to work out for us. So that's a positive.
Yeah, absolutely. How are you seeing right now, like kind of that generational gap in, receptiveness or motivation for wellness? Are you seeing that change and more cohesiveness, or are you still kind of seeing a divide there?
We're lucky because I think we are pretty cohesive, and we have people. We have I think our youngest officer is 22 years old, and our oldest officer is 55 years old. And as a smaller department, I think we're together a lot more because we're around the same people more and more, and I think that builds a lot of cohesiveness. And we're lucky in that way that even with our younger officers, they tend to listen to what the older officers say, their command, their leadership, and I think it's worked out well for us here having the mixture.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that um I think, younger people can motivate older people, and then like younger people can learn from older people, and it's kind of that team mentality. I think it's interesting because when I work with agencies, what I typically find, and this is kind of opposite to what everyone says, they're like, "Oh, like the old timers aren't going to be receptive." And I'm like, those are actually the people who always are coming to me saying, "What can I do?" Because they already are super tight, their
Mhm.
back hurts, they have 20 years of cumulative stress, and they're actually, to me, the people who are like coming up to me asking for stuff. And I think the younger generation is more receptive to it, but I think when you're young and you feel good, you don't feel like you need it as much, you
Right.
know? So I think it is a kind of an interesting dynamic. And I have in my line of work have found that there's actually receptiveness on both ends. Maybe
Yeah, I
not for
agree.
everybody, but you can't get 100% of anyone
No,
either
no,
way.
no, not at all.
So we talked a little bit about the importance of sleep, and you shared a stat with me that I thought was really interesting, and I was hoping that you could share a little bit more about what you're seeing with sleep and the importance of sleep.
Yeah, most definitely. We have some officers here that I can name. I'm not going to name names, but there's a few people that have had some issues with sleeping at night. We try not to rotate everybody's shifts. If we have to, it's rare just because people get to the shifts they want to do so they can try to sleep better. But if they were, still having problems, we would encourage them to go to a sleep specialist and get tested for see what they needed. And then I've had a couple officers that were diagnosed with sleep apnea. They have CPAP machines, and I think I told you the numbers earlier. I would say they're 60 to 70% better. I can notice the difference once they've been diagnosed and they've either, they've had help through a physician and now they're getting the sleep. And you don't realize how important it is until you can actually see the change that these people go through once they're able to sleep well at night.
100%. There was something, and I'm not going to be able to quote it directly, so don't write this down and hold me to it. But there was a statistic that I saw a while back that said if you don't get enough sleep, that it's almost like you are operating intoxicated. Like
Yeah.
obviously you're not, but they're saying it's like having a blood alcohol level of someone who's like severely intoxicated. And so it
Yeah.
affects your decision making. It affects, emotional regulation, mood, performance, all of it. And so there's a lot of data right now coming out about the importance of sleep. And a lot of it is also saying like, even if you miss 1 or 2 hours of sleep, it's not even saying, hey, if you only get 4 hours of sleep, it's saying, hey, like if you only get 6 or 7 hours of sleep, it's still impacting you in a negative way. And
Right.
so, and a lot of that is to do with, of course, shift work is challenging. Especially if someone's working graves and they have a family and they, want to get up and be active with their family during the day. But also diet is going to contribute to sleep. Caffeine obviously is going to contribute. Alcohol contributes to sleep quality and stress. Like if you can, and here's a fun little fact for you, but if we can regulate stress before sleep, we can improve sleep 20 to 40%, which is crazy because your
Yeah.
heart rate is up, your blood pressure's up, your mind's going everywhere, and it makes it almost impossible to sleep. So, I think that if we can manage some of those things, that can help to improve it as well. Try to manage and mitigate stress as much as possible. Eating healthier. Try not to drink too much alcohol or caffeine, especially close to bed. Um,
Right.
and yeah, I mean, I can't do anything about the shift schedule, but
No, and I unfortunately I can't either, but we can regulate a little bit. When I first started, we were rotating like every month. I
mhm.
wasn't obviously I was just a patrolman then, and that was super hard on your body. Because you would go from working, like a 6A to 6P to a 6P to 6A, and you never got into any type of REM sleep. It felt like you never got any deep sleep. So we've changed that. Um, and hopefully that helps a little bit. And I know the stress is a big factor as well. That's tough if they don't, no matter how your mental health is, there's calls and stuff you go home, you think about. So there's going to be certain factors, I think, especially in our profession, that are going to lead to not getting all the best sleep every night, but just by regulating and having some people being checked out and, like you said, working with them, diet and things, it's gotten a lot better actually here. So that's an improvement I think we've made here.
Yeah. One of the things, and I'll kind of just throw this out as like a tactical tool, to your point of like coming home and thinking about things. One of the things that is backed by so much science and the thing to remember, and we talked about mental resiliency earlier, and then now we're talking a little bit about like stress management and mitigation. Stress management is reactive, right? So it's
Mhm.
you went through something stressful, you're already stressed, your cortisol's up, your heart rate, your blood pressure, all the things, right? You're like on high alert. Stress management is going to be reactive. We're going to try to bring you back down to baseline as much as we can so that we can help to improve quality of life from there. Mental resiliency is going to be more of that forward thinking training, right? That
Right.
proactive training of how can we put in place things that make your mind stronger and more resilient to things that might happen in the future. One thing for sleep and this might be a little bit on the edge of like woo. So like tell me if you think that like this would not be well received, but it's
Okay.
backed by science. It's called brain dumping. And it's essentially journaling, but it's not. It's you have a notebook, and you could do this before you get home, like maybe right after shift in your car, maybe in the driveway of your home before you walk into the door or right before you go to sleep and just write down everything that's on your mind. And it does not have to be cohesive or like legible or anything. It's just like write down everything you're frustrated about, everything that happened, write it all down, get it all out. And it's this exercise of like taking it from your brain getting it out onto the paper and then physically like closing that book and then putting it aside. And so it creates that space of like, okay, I put it there, I got it out, it's there. And now I can, take a step forward and I can be there for my family without being distracted by this, or I can go to sleep. And then of course there's other things to regulate the nervous system before bed, but that's
Right.
something that could be useful like after your shift, just get it all out, write it all down, everything you're frustrated about, anything that happened that's still on your mind, and then close the book and forget about it, at least
Sure.
for now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it
It,
too
it,
woo?
I don't, maybe for
Yeah.
some, but I think it would definitely be worth a trying. And again, I think some of the younger people, there may be a couple that already do that, to be honest with you, but I think they for sure will be open to something like that. And my hope would be that if the old timers see it and maybe that it's working, that it would pick up. I'll be honest, it might be a hard sell to some of the older guys, but I think it's definitely doable.
Yeah. And I think that the thing is, and I think that this is what's been happening over the last 5 years, is having a lot of different things that may not work for everybody. Like we talked about before, like you're never going to get 100% of people for anything.
Right.
Um, Not everyone's going to want to go to the gym. Not everyone's going to want to, focus on their sleep or their nutrition. But if you have little things like little nuggets that everyone feels like there's something, then, at least it's helping one aspect.
Right.
But yeah, maybe not everyone would like that, but it's
Yeah.
something tactical. If anyone's listening, something
Yeah.
tactical that's worth maybe a try. And if not, then you can just forget I said
No,
it.
I think it's a good option, and I think I agree with what you said. The more options you have, the more people that will do different things, because like, you're not going to get 100% compliance, like you said. But if
Yep.
there's something that 10 of the people are interested in, five people interested in, then I think that's a win then.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's just to your point of like, how can you start to see improvement in people? If you're seeing 60 to 70% improvement in performance when people are prioritizing their sleep, that's huge. If you're
Hmm.
starting to see, as an agency, a reduction in injury because people are working out or doing mobility training, like that's great. That's huge. That's what you want. So how can you put in place things or at least awareness around things that are going to help to improve the individuals within your organization. And then it's also going to help their performance on the job, which is going to help the organization. And then that's also going to, impact the community. And so it's kind
Right.
of this like ripple effect that happens. I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you one final question.
Okay.
What words of advice would you have to someone who is earlier in their career in the context of wellness? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way.
Sure. I would tell them that it is not taboo and you are not weak if you want to talk to when you have a tough call or you see, something that's a horrible accident. I personally worked a homicide with a girl that I knew from a small town. She was the same age as my daughter. Um, she'd been missing for 2 years, and we found her eventually and got her remains and everything brought home to her parents. But that was tough because I knew her since she was a little kid. She was 16 at the time she was murdered. Um, and I was at the point in my career, luckily, where it wasn't a stigma. It wasn't an issue for me to reach out and talk to people. And that would be one of my biggest things. Take care of your mental health and wellness first. I would also, like we said earlier, stress trying to do some physical fitness stuff because you'll feel better that way, which will make you feel better mentally. It releases the hormones and the things that make you feel better. And it kind of goes to me, it goes hand in hand with each other. Um, so that would be my advice. And stay in shape. It just looks better if you're at least somewhat physically fit than having someone who's overweight and you get a kid that's not going to probably not respect you. They're not going to listen to you. They size you up right away. They can take you. So
Mm.
mental and physical fitness, I think, is huge. Even when you're young and in shape, you need to do that, I think, to have a career that's going to last 30 years.
Thank you. I appreciate you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time and spending the last 45-ish minutes with me. So thank you very
Yeah.
much. If there's anything we missed, I'll give you the opportunity to take the floor. Otherwise, that's all I have for you.
No, I think we're good. I just want to thank you for having me on and giving me the opportunity to talk about that stuff. Thank you.
Of course. I appreciate your time so much.